I'm your host, Sean. I'm getting spooky with Sean, and welcome to the Boneyard. Today, we got a really awesome guest. I'm super excited to introduce her. We have paranormal investigator and twin. We're going to get into that here in a second. Twin of Soul Sisters Paranormal. We got Kristy Summer. How you doing, Kristy?
I am fantastic, Sean. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited. During this month of October, we're doing all the macabre and weird, creepy things, and I think it's fun. It's been fun so far, and I think it's going to be fun in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's right up my alley. So I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Christy, would you like to give a formal introduction of yourself?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Kristy Sumner, and I'm the founder of Soul Sisters Paranormal. It's an all-female paranormal investigation team that I founded with my twin sister, our younger sister, and two female family friends in 2013. I am also currently the co-owner of the historic Scott County Jail here in Huntsville, Tennessee. It's a jail that was built in 1904 in operation as a jail until 2008. So we have daytime tours as well as what we call a paranormal research location here. So we've been doing that since the fall of 2021. And so that really is encompassing Soul Sisters as well as my day job here at the jail.
That is wild. That is wild. I mean, so like you started the paranormal Soul Sisters group, and now you own a jail that has paranormal activity in it.
Correct. So, like I said, we started Soul Sisters in 2013, and it was really something that we kind of fell into as really a girls' trip. My sisters and I, we live in different parts of the country, so we would routinely travel to meet up and do some cool things during girls' weekends. And in 2013, we met in Moundsville, West Virginia, which is where the West Virginia State Penitentiary is located. And we had a family friend that sat on the board of that facility, and he said, while you're here, why don't you take one of your nights and stay in the penitentiary and see if you can connect with our spirits? So we did that. We jumped at that opportunity. We just had a few digital voice recorders, a couple of night vision video cameras, and that was really the extent. It was a very rudimentary investigation. And then after that, we left that experience with what we felt was compelling data. And so then we formed Soul Sisters Paranormal, and we've been going to haunted and historic locations ever since. And then during that, about 6 years ago, I met my best friend, Miranda Young from Ghost Biker Explorations. And we have a mutual respect for history and how we do our investigations. So we became fast friends, and she's from Scott County originally, which is where the jail is. And in 2021, she said, do you want to come up to Tennessee with me and maybe try this? Because we had been talking about a location and really try this business. And I said, listen, opening a museum in the middle of a pandemic, what can go wrong with that? Let's do this. And so we did. And it's been a great ride ever since. Like I said, we have day tours here at the jail, and we've had over 150 teams investigate. We've been listed as one of the top 5 haunted locations in Tennessee. So it's a really cool experience going from investigator to location owner.
That is awesome. Moundsville.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard a ton about Moundsville. What was that experience like for you when you guys got there and started investigating?
It was interesting. We had always watched the television shows, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures and such. And we found ourselves saying, well, why didn't they ask this question? Why didn't they go to this location on the property, or stay longer here, or use this technique? And so we said, if we ever had the opportunity, we'd do our own investigation. And it really presented itself with Moundsville. And so the first night, like I said, was rudimentary. We really didn't know what we were doing. We were just sitting there really listening for sounds and noises. And we captured those. We captured disembodied voices that night. We captured footsteps that we couldn't explain, men speaking in an area that we knew that there was nobody present. And so that really solidified the fact that we wanted to pursue this further. We wanted to go to these historic locations, really tell the narrative of these locations, and couple that with any unexplained data that we find. And that really catapulted us into what we're doing now. And we've been back since, and we've gotten great evidence every time we go.
Yeah, I was looking at your website, thesoulsisters.com, and like, you guys have been to a ton of locations.
We have been.
That is pretty awesome.
It's been a good ride so far. When it's not a lot of people can say that they've touched the doorknobs that Lizzie Borden has touched, or stayed the night in a maximum security prison, or gone out to the Villisca Axe murder house. But we're very fortunate that we've had the opportunity to go to these locations.
Yeah, absolutely. What now? I I didn't know that you owned a jail. What is it all the time that you get in paranormal activity, or is it like pretty predictable residual energies that happen?
No, we get everything here from intelligent to residuals. But even during the day, like, we'll be sitting here during the day like I'm doing now, and you'll hear footsteps upstairs. Whistling is extremely common. You'll hear one of the cell doors open or close. That's pretty routine. So that's the unpredictable stuff. There are some instances where we know certain things happen, and when they happen, they've been consistently happening at a certain time. So, for example, around 10 o'clock at night, the people who are here, when they capture footsteps, it seems to be around the 10 o'clock or the 1 o'clock in the morning hour. So we tell people when they investigate here, if you want to try to capture those things, we're not guaranteeing that they're going to happen at those times. But if you want to see if you can capture them, just try to be upstairs on the third level at this time and sit for a few minutes and see if you hear them. But like I said, footsteps are loud. And then we get a lot of intelligent hauntings where we'll ask specific questions and get specific answers. Yeah, it's all the time here. Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. And for anybody who's listening that may not know, what is the difference between a residual haunting and an intelligent haunting?
Well, an intelligent haunting is those that you get an intelligent response, or a response in lieu of a question that you ask. So, for example, when I say, "Can you say my name?" and I get the response of Kristy, that's an intelligent response. Or, "Can you open this door or shut this door?" when you ask, and it happens, that's an intelligent response. A residual response is something. The way I explain it is, if you have a record, like a vinyl record on a record player, and there's a scratch in the record, every time that record hits the needle, it's going to scratch. It's predictable that it's going to scratch, and it's going to jump. And so that's kind of how I explain a residual haunting, where there's a blip in time. So an anniversary, a birth date, or a death date, or something that you come upon, you're more likely going to find some type of evidence at that time or on that date, and that's residual.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I I've heard it explained, residual explained, but not like that. And that's a really good explanation of residual hauntings. And I don't think I've ever witnessed a residual haunting. I've seen some intelligent hauntings. Now, for you as an investigator, what is more fascinating to you? Is it the residual hauntings or the intelligent?
Well, obviously, the intelligence are extremely fascinating, because we're making a connection on that same time level, right? So, for example, like I said, if I say if I say what's my name, and I get the word Kristy, I know that we're on that same timeline, that same time and space, if you will, where this entity is acknowledging that they understand the question, and they're giving me an intelligent answer. So that is absolutely fascinating. The residuals are really cool when they can validate something that has happened. So, for example, we investigated the Ma Barker house in Central Florida, which is the site of the 1935 shootout between Ma and Fred Barker and 2 members of the FBI, or 12 members of the FBI. So Ma and Fred were part of the Barker Carpus gang, one of the most prolific gangs of the 1920s and 1930s. So, long story short, they were killed in this house. The FBI surrounded this house. A gun battle ensued, and Ma and Fred were killed in the upstairs room of this house. Now, the family had the presence of mind to preserve the house as it was. So if you go in now, you'll see the bullet holes in the wall. There's bullet holes in the furniture and all of that. So, like I said, we were the first in 2016 to be permitted to investigate this house. And so what I wanted to do, it was a 2-part investigation. What I wanted to do on the first part was to put voice recorders and audio and video cameras in the house on the night of the anniversary of the shootout and let it run. And we were not there. We had complete control of the environment. We locked it down. We knew that nobody could approach the house because it sits on about 40 acres by itself. So we let all of that equipment run because I wanted to find evidence of residual hauntings. And so we left. And so everything ran for the night. It encompassed the hours of January 16th, where the shootout would have occurred 83 years prior. And what we captured there was fascinating. There was one instance at about 5:30 in the morning, which is when the shootout started, where we captured two voices. The first one said, "Freddie." The next one said, "Yeah, Ma." And the first one said, "Get ready." So I think they actually said that right before the shootout happened, right? Get ready, get your guns ready. They're going to start shooting at us. So that to me was extremely intelligent or extremely fascinating because it really validated what was said in the room 83 years prior. So that was a really cool example of a residual haunting for us.
That is pretty cool. And to hear that as somebody on the outside, not
Mhm.
having experienced this, kind of, I get goosebumps.
Yeah,
You know,
it really
and,
does.
and all I could think about is like you're helping solve some things that were necessarily skipped over or not known
Mhm.
about that time and place.
Mhm. And that's really kind of what we do, that when we go into a location, we always say, "Can we tell your story? What is your story? Allow us to tell this for you if you wanna communicate with us." So going back to the Ma Barker house, I told you it was a two-part investigation. So the first part was leaving all of that stationary stuff, and then Jenny and I went back about 2 weeks later, and we stayed in the house for about 6 hours,
Wow.
conducting an in-person, investigation, just being there, asking questions. And again, we were upstairs in that room where Ma and Fred were killed, and we had a spirit box, which, for those who don't know, it's a small AM/FM radio that's been modified to very quickly sweep through frequencies. So when you turn it on, it's like as it's running through frequencies. The idea is that spirits can use that white noise to communicate with us. So anyway, so we were up there, we were using the spirit box, and I said, "What happened in this room?" And through the spirit box, it said, "They murdered us, we the ones dead." And so that is their story. And that really solidified for me that the spirit box is an interesting tool to use, because if you watch that and you listen to it, you can actually hear the frequency still changing behind the phrase. So that was a very interesting, and so that's what we do. We try to tell their story, and for them, that was their story. They were murdered by the FBI, and so we were able to communicate that to our audience, which I felt was pretty cool.
That's pretty interesting. The length of the sentence over that many sweeps happening.
Exactly.
That doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't. And the chances of radio frequencies being able to line those words up, it's astronomical. I mean, there is no calculation for that. That's how astronomical it is. And so again, that to me really solidified the fact that the spirit box is a tool that we would continue to use during our investigations. And I actually quite enjoy it because we can get some interesting things on it.
So speaking of equipment and explain the spirit box, what other equipment do you guys run?
Well, first of all, the very first thing that we always take with us are voice recorders, because I feel that EVPs or disembodied voices are very hard for us to explain or debunk. So, for example, if we're in a location and I know that there's only 4 females on the entire property, yet I'm capturing a man's voice or I'm capturing a child's voice, that's very hard for me to explain away. And so we always take our voice recorders with us. We use body cameras. We use stationary night vision video cameras. As far as tools, we take K2 meters, the spirit box. We have EDI boxes. We have REM pods. And we really enjoy coming up with trigger items that we can take to these locations that are really germane to the location or to the event that happened in that location. So, for example, I'll go back to the West Virginia State Penitentiary there in Moundsville. This was the second time that we went. So we had knowledge of the fact that there was an inmate that was housed there. His name was Red Snyder. And during life, he was a very bad guy, leader of the Aryan Brotherhood. Anybody that he wanted killed in the prison got killed. So he was a really bad guy. They kept him in solitary confinement. But in life, he had two vices. The first one was tobacco, and the second was watching Days of Our Lives. And so during the day, they would wheel the television in front of his cell. He'd watch the episode, and then they'd take the TV away. So what we did is, and we were the first team to do this, we downloaded an episode of Days of Our Lives onto our laptop, and we put it in his cell. And we said, this is for you. We understand this is what you like. Watch this episode. We're going to go to another part of the building and see if we can communicate, but this is for you. We're leaving this for you. And so once the episode ran, the laptop shut down because I only had an hour of battery life on purpose. And so it shut down. And after it shut down, we captured some disembodied voices. And then when we went back, we used a couple of K2 meters and had a really cool K2 session. And at the end of that, I said, thank you for communicating with us. And we captured a man's voice saying, no, thank you. And I think that was in response to the trigger item that we left. So anywhere we go, we try to come up with unique and different trigger items to try to elicit a response like that.
And you're using multiple forms of investigation, multiple assets at your availability, trigger items, using the the voice recorders, and you're also using cameras and like catching all this evidence and being able to compile it. Does it get overwhelming at times?
Really going through all of the video footage and the audio stuff that we capture, that is tedious. We don't have an investigation on a Saturday night and release the video on a Monday. That's just not possible for us. So what we do is we go through, I sit and listen to every piece of audio, and we sit and watch every piece of video. So if I've got 10 voice recorders running for 10 hours, I'm listening to 100 hours of audio. And so it usually takes about a couple of months from the investigation to actually getting the video out. But that's just kind of how we operate. That's kind of how we want our investigations to run. So what we do is we produce an introductory video, if you will, of the location, really telling the history, and then coupling that with any unexplained data that we find during the night. And that's kind of how Soul Sisters operate. So it is tedious. It takes a long time to go through.
Yeah, I've always, you and I talked before we hit record, and like I said, I've watched a lot of different paranormal shows and stuff like that. And one of my thoughts has always been how long does it actually take to process the evidence, to either solidify it or debunk it, and then put it in a format which is viewable to the audience. Mm-hmm. And it's months.
It is. I think with the advent or the uptick in use of things like TikTok and Instagram and stuff, I think you see a lot of people that are moving to that format of live investigations and running through it, just going through a location for a couple hours. And what they capture is what they capture, and they're done. For me, that's really, again, not how we want to approach our investigations, because we think the history is so important. And you can't, in my mind, gloss over the history by just going through it quickly on a live and do the location justice and therefore do the spirits justice. So for us, it's very important to get a narrative out there that explains the history, why we feel these hauntings are occurring, and really put that in, and then bring in the evidence behind that to justify that this place does have a haunting reputation. And that's just kind of how we operate and how we do our investigations.
Absolutely. What is the most profound or unique location you've ever investigated?
Sean, that's a tough question, because every location we go to is so fascinating for us. We get to have a very tactile experience with these historical places. I mean, we've been to the Villa Skaggs Murder House, the Lizzie Borden House, St. Augustine Lighthouse, Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, and they're all unique because of their unique history. You investigate Brushy, and it's so different than investigating the St. Augustine Lighthouse. I think the one investigation that we've done, and again, we've done so many, the one that was so unique, I think, was the old Gilchrist County Jail in Trenton, Florida. And this one was fascinating because that night, every piece of equipment that we had was validating every other piece of equipment response. So we were capturing audible voices. And we heard them in the moment. At the same time, we see a shadow figure. At the same time, the SLS camera is going off. At the same time, the REM pod is going off and the K2 is alarming. And so that, to me, if I could call an investigation a perfect investigation, it would be that location, simply because everything was validating that night. And you really don't see that, because if you go into a location and you get an EVP or your K2 goes off a couple of times, yes, that's fascinating. But if you can get the K2s to go off the exact same time you're capturing something on the SLS camera, at the exact same time you're seeing a visible figure and hearing a response, now you've got 4 pieces of evidence working in conjunction with each other that's building your case that something unexplainable is happening. And so, the Gilchrist County Jail is one that was really a fascinating investigation.
That definitely sounds very interesting. Having all those, your different platforms just hitting off at all night. That's pretty. It's pretty awesome.
And it's pretty rare. So we were very very excited about that investigation.
Now, do you have people that come to you and say, "Hey, Kristy, think my house is haunted. Would you and Soul Sisters come out and investigate my house?" You
Mhm.
guys have
Yeah.
doing that?
Yeah, we do that. So for both residential and business owners. And so the very first thing that we do is, when we get a request like that, is we kind of ask them, what they're experiencing. We'll do kind of a deep dive into the history of the location. And then we take a day tour, both for those requests and any place that we go to. We take a day tour first, because we want to look at anything that could be causing these quote unquote hauntings, and see if there's any environmental factors that we can control for. And if we can control for those, if there's nothing happening, then we know that those environmental factors are what's causing it. Because sometimes, if you're a homeowner or a business owner and you're immersed in these locations, you don't think outside of that box, essentially. And so for example, I'll give you an example of this. We had a business owner call us, and he had just moved into this storefront. So it's a storefront. It's got glass window, glass doors, glass windows. It's a long, narrow store, had windows and mirrors around, and these display cases for his items in the store. And so he called us, and he'd only been open for a few weeks. And he said, "I think my business is haunted. We have all these night vision video cameras up, and on a nightly basis, they're going off. Something's messing with them. We just think that something's going on." And I said, "Okay, we'll check it out." So we went to the location, and we were there for about 3 hours, and we didn't capture anything, nothing. We didn't feel anything. Our equipment wasn't alarming. So we left our night vision video cameras in different locations in the store. And so we left, and I came back the next morning, and I picked up all our stuff, and I asked him, I said, "Did your cameras alarm at any time during the night?" And he's like, "Oh my gosh, it was so active last night." And I said, "Okay, give us the timestamps of when your things alarmed, and I'm going to cross-reference them with our equipment and see what's going on." And so when he did that, what we found was his storefront set perpendicular to a road with a high volume of U-turn traffic. And as the traffic was making these U-turns, the lights were going into his storefront, hitting these mirrors, and essentially blinding his night vision video cameras. And so when you look at it, without thinking of those things, it does look like something's messing with your cameras, right? They're going off, they're going on, they're flickering. But it was really the light that was blinding them. And so I told him, I said, either take down the mirrors or move your cameras to where that's not going to happen. And I think your problem will go away. And it did. And so that's what we really try to do first. We try to look at these environmental factors first. So to very long-windedly answer your question, yes, we go in and we help business owners, we help residential owners, and we try to isolate what we think could be the cause. And then barring that, if there are things that are unexplainable that we capture when we do the investigation, then we'll work with them to decide how they want to handle that.
Yeah, I've always wondered what it was like when somebody goes to look at an event or look at a location for an investigation right off the bat. I mean, obviously, we see some of these. If you're a big paranormal buff and you watch like Ghost Adventures or Ghost Hunters or some of these other shows that we talk about, you'll see that they go in at the daytime, and sometimes you see them just sweeping along with the EMF meter, and you're like, what are they doing? What is that for?
Mhm. The EMF meters, these actually measure electronic frequencies. And really, they were created for electricians to find sources of energy and stuff like that. Obviously, we use them because if energy cannot be created or destroyed, then what we're speaking with has the potential to be energy. And so we do believe that we're connecting to that energy that's still allowed to communicate with us. And so if you're in a location where there's no power, and yet you have these things going off, that is a potential that you're communicating with something. So for example, when we did the Ma Barker house, going back to that investigation, that house, it sits on about 40 acres by itself. There is no power. There's no water to it. It's just sitting there. And so when we have K2 meters going off and we know that it's none of our equipment that's setting it off, that has the potential to say, okay, something's acting on this. There's some type of energy acting on this, and it has the potential to be supernatural. And so that's why we use K2 meters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was always fascinated by that when you see like the K2 meter just spike up and you're like, "Oh, goodness." That's terrifying. Now
Yeah.
now that blast energy, for somebody that hasn't experienced it, that blast of energy or the electronic blast that happens. I don't know how this actually happens.
Mhm.
But when there's a huge spike, is there like an atmosphere change? Like, does it affect you as an investigator?
It could be, yes. So there's a couple of things that we experience, either a temperature change, a fluctuation, a quick fluctuation. For me personally, if I feel that there's a shift in the energy, it may sound weird, but my left leg kind of starts to tingle, like kind of like if your foot falls asleep and you get up and you feel that tingly sensation. That's what starts to happen to me personally. And if that starts to happen, I can kind of say, okay, I think something is going to either manifest, or we may get a spike on something, or evidence of something on one of our pieces of equipment. So that's kind of my tell, if you will. I'm not saying that, I'm connected, in via empath or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just kind of my tell. That's what I started to realize happens to me personally when we start to experience things. We actually had a guided ghost hunt here at the jail a few nights ago. And one of the guys who was on the group, he's not a paranormal investigator. These are just people from the public who want to do an investigation with us. He was standing upstairs and he had a K2 meter, and all of a sudden it started spiking. But right before that, he said, it feels like something is touching the back of my neck. And as he's saying that, the K2 goes off. So that was kind of interesting, that he was feeling that and giving us, audibly saying that this is my personal experience, and then the K2 goes off. So that was kind of interesting. So it does affect people in different ways.
That's pretty awesome. I always wonder what it would do to me.
Yeah.
so do you ever bring like psychic mediums with you on investigations?
We have not, and it's not because I don't believe in them. It's one of those things where just getting our team to a location requires a lot of logistics, because we all work, and so it's really a quick thing for us sometimes,
Mhm.
and it just hasn't really worked out schedule wise for us to
Yeah.
do that. So we have not taken a medium with us.
Yeah, I don't know. I've obviously watching a bunch of shows. This is how I feel. Just like watch a bunch of shows, and I'm like, hey, I got questions.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I watch shows, I just feel like I'm watching them, and they're like, oh, we got a psychic medium. It's like, well, guarantee that person's already known where they're going. Like, you
Yeah.
can blindfold them, but they already know.
And that's a great possibility. It's interesting. We've had several mediums that'll come through the jail. Some of them with teams, some of them will just come in, not even telling us to take a day tour. For example, we had a lady come in about 2 or 3 months ago. She just bought a ticket, did a day tour, just didn't really say anything to me. I was here, and so she comes back downstairs and she said, I think there's a woman on the second floor. And I said, oh, really? And she said, yeah, I'm a psychic. And it just kind of came to me. She started communicating with me. And I said, that's awesome. So we do have those. And that was a story that I hadn't told her. She may have learned through research, but it was just kind of interesting. She didn't make herself known to me as a medium. She just kind of came down and said, I think you've got a woman on the second floor. And I said, that's quite common. We have experienced her here. But then you have some that'll come in and just kind of reiterate some of the stories that we have out there, just kind of reiterate them. So to your point, you kind of take them with a little grain of salt. But for the most part, when people come in here, I think they do get some interesting communications with our spirits if they have that ability.
Absolutely. I conducted an interview and somebody said something to me that actually really stuck with me, and I've chuckled about this. And he said, "Evil does not live at a location; it infests a location."
Mhm.
Is that something that you've noticed too?
For me, I have a different outlook on demons and infestations and stuff than a lot of paranormal investigators. First of all, for me, when we go to these locations, we're attempting to communicate with a spirit that had a human existence, right? That lived, that died, and for some reason they're still attached to that location. For me, a demon is not something that had a human existence. It's the representation of evil, of the good and the evil in the world. And so we don't go looking for those things. We don't go provoking those things. We don't go in with bravado to these locations and try to elicit some type of negative response. That's just not how we operate. And so I've never experienced anything like that. I've never experienced the demonic. I've never experienced an infestation. We've never had anything attached to us. We've never been assaulted physically, emotionally, or mentally at any of these locations. But I think that's the way we go in and approach these investigations. We have a lot of people, I think, that are influenced by social media now that are going out and saying that they're quote unquote paranormal investigators when really what they are YouTubers and TikTokers and Instagrammers who want likes, subscribes, and monetary channels. Not to disparage them. If that's what they want to do and that's how they make an income, that is absolutely fantastic. But so, for example, here at our location, we have literally said there's nothing demonic here. There's nothing evil here. To say otherwise would be slander and defamation, and we're not going to allow it. And so we've actually had people not come because we have that policy, and which is kind of telling in and of itself. But for us, we just stop it here at our door. If other locations want to allow that, that's fine. But as far as an infestation or demonic activity or anything here, it does not happen. And personally, in all my years of investigation, I've never experienced it.
I think that's very important. The intention behind it, right? And
Absolutely.
and if you go looking for trouble, you're going to find it. But
Oh,
if
absolutely.
you go looking for research and for evidence, you're
Mhm.
going to find it. And I think you are a great prime example of that. You go with the intention of we want to gather evidence, we want to prove or disprove that this location is haunted, and that's what we want.
Mhm. And that, again, that's our approach. If other teams want to do something different, that is absolutely fine. I'm not going to disparage anybody that does that approach. It's just not how we operate.
Yeah, yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people say this place is like, and no, no, you have the wrong intentions here. You're not
Mhm.
going with the intention of gathering evidence. You're going with the intention of creating some controversy, and
Oh,
I
absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
terrible.
absolutely. I mean, when you I think as audience members, people have to realize that their entire reason for being some of these TV stars and celebrities and YouTubers and stuff is to get money and advertising.
Mhm.
So they have to sensationalize it, right? If you watch any of our videos, I guarantee you, I 100% guarantee you, you're not going to find a jump scare. You're not going to find us screaming and running out of a location. A
Yeah,
chair is not going to be thrown across the room. That's not happening on any of our videos. And for that reason, we're not as well known as, other TikTokers or YouTubers or whatever. And that's fine. That's
yeah.
absolutely fine. What we're doing is doing what I feel is a service to the location by bringing the recognition of their story and that narrative, and hopefully get historic preservation behind it. It's not for us to make any money off this. We're all self-funded. Everything that we do is self-funded. We have no monetization of our YouTube or anything like that, and that's on purpose.
And I think that's very important. Is you're not doing it for the money.
Mm-mm.
If you were doing it for the money, you'd be, out there, all the time, every day. But you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it for preservation. That's
Mhm.
important.
Exactly. And so, and I don't want somebody to come back and say, "Oh, you're just putting this quote unquote evidence out there because you need likes and subscribes." Absolutely, I'm not. We're putting out things that we can't explain in the moment when we controlled for everything else, and we don't make money for it because of that reason. I don't want somebody to say, oh, you're just putting it out there to get subs, and that's not right, because we don't monetize.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's even further proof. You went to Villisca Axe murder house. You guys have gone to Lizzie Borden house. Other investigators have gone there like, oh, it's riddled with demons. No, it's not. It's a
Mm-mm.
location where human beings were and lived and died.
Exactly. And that's exactly right. And, we want to hold true to your point. We want to hold true to that historical narrative and the pain that was caused there, and try to find evidence that some of that energy is still there.
Now, so from your personal experience and your professional experience, why do you think some spirits stay after they've passed on and others don't?
We work on three theories. The first one is that there's legitimately unfinished business that has to be fulfilled before the energy can move on. So I'll give you a quick example of this. So my granddaddy died in 1986, and
Mhm.
I was very close to my nana, my grandma. I was very close to my nana, and in fact, I'm actually named after her. And so she lived in the same house that she had lived in with granddaddy up until she died. And so in 2016, I had a very vivid dream that granddaddy came to me in this dream. And it was so vivid. I can tell you how he smelled, how his drawstring on his pants was tied, everything on the wall behind him. That's how vivid it was. So real, this dream. And in the dream, he said, "I'm waiting on your nana. You're going to be getting a call soon." And I didn't know what to do with that information, right? I just, what do you do with that? And so about 2 weeks later, we got a call that Nana had fallen and she was in the hospital, and she broke her hip and they couldn't really repair it. So she ended up getting MRSA, and she ended up going into hospice. So she was in hospice for about 3 weeks. And on the day that she passed, and with permission from my family, I said to Jenny, I said, I know where she's going. She's going to the house and she's going to meet up with granddaddy. And so we grabbed some K2 meters and some other equipment. And literally 3 hours after she died, we go to the house and we're standing in the spot that was depicted in my dream. It was his office. And we had the two K2 meters. I had a gray one and a black one. And I said, Nana, are you here? Both K2 meters start going like crazy. And I said, okay, can you stop and just go to the black one? And it did. And I said, okay, stop and just go to the gray one. And it did. And so we still, there's a series of questions. We asked if granddaddy was with her, and we got some responses. I believe that Nana and granddaddy met up together. He was waiting on her, and they ascended together. I'm a Christian, so I'll call it heaven.
Yeah.
They moved on to heaven together, because we went back 2 weeks later, stood in the exact same spot with the exact same equipment, and asked the exact same questions as a validation, and nothing. We got no response. We got no hits. We felt nothing. The air was different. So I believe that granddaddy was still here, but once he met up with Nana, that was his unfinished business, and he moved on. So I don't think Nana and granddaddy are here. I don't think they're ghosts. I don't think they're spirits. So there's unfinished business. The next one is, I think that they're stuck and they don't know how to ascend to what's next. I think we see this with children a lot, that they're just stuck in that location, and they can't move on. And then the third one is fear of retribution for the life they lived on earth. And I think that's why we see a lot of individuals in jails and prisons, because they weren't so great in life, and they're comfortable staying here rather than moving on because they're afraid of some eternal damnation. And so those are the three things that we kind of work with when we investigate.
I've heard of the first two. I've heard of unfinished business and then kind of being stuck. The last one I haven't heard of it, but it makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, those are those theories that we work with. Others may have different theories or different ideas, but I just think like Red Snyder at Moundsville. Right, you have this guy. If you've been taught, say he's been taught his whole life that you're going to go to hell for your sins, maybe he doesn't want to go there, and maybe he's afraid of that, and he's just content to stay where he's at.
Absolutely, absolutely. One thing that I find really irritating as somebody that watches content is seeing people that go to these abandoned buildings and try to investigate these buildings without any prior knowledge of, well, any prior anything, and no they're not allowed to be there or supposed to be there. What
Mhm.
would you say to those people that go into these random locations that don't know what they're encountering?
For me, I think it does a disservice to you, to the location, and really to the field of paranormal investigations. And to our point earlier, if you go in and try to provoke or ask questions that you don't need to be asking, I do think you're going to get a negative response, or you had the potential to get a negative response at these locations. And it really is just a lack of respect for the history of these locations. Like I said, for us, we do a very deep dive into the history before we go anywhere. I mean, even if it's a cemetery or something, we'll do a deep dive into the history of what's there, what the background is of the location. And really that allows us to it guides our investigations, right? If I know, like, I'm going to Fort Mifflin and we're going to try to communicate with the spirit of William Howe, who's said to be a spirit there, I want to know about him. I want to know why he was there, what drove him to do what he did to get there and be hung at Fort Mifflin, so I can ask intelligent questions to that, and then leave trigger items for something that may elicit a response from him. And I think if you go in blind, it just really kind of it doesn't enhance your experience at all. It really just shows that you have no concept of where you're going or the historical significance of the location you're going to.
Absolutely. And one other thing that I thought about, while I was here, when I was watching some of these things, is not only are you exposing yourself and you don't really understand like what you're stepping into, but also sometimes humans are scarier than ghosts.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we carry guns with us, honestly, for that very reason. We always have our pistols with us.
Absolutely. That's very important. Protection is very
Mhm.
important. So what is next for you and for Soul Sisters Paranormal
Well,
Group?
we have appearances at different paracons or paranormal conventions. And we also have different speaking engagements. So we have several of those that we're going to through the end of the year. So, for example, I'll be at Old South Pittsburgh Hospital on December 9th. We'll be talking about Soul Sisters, about the historic Scott County Jail, but that's a fundraiser for cancer. So one of our paranormal investigator friends, Rob Klaus, has terminal cancer. So that is a fundraiser for him. It's called Scare Away Cancer. In March of next year, the 23rd and 24th, I'll be speaking at the Women of the Paranormal Convention that'll be held at Harriman Hospital as well as Brushy Mountain. So we have a lot of those different appearances. By the end of the year, I hope to release at least 2 more investigation videos, one from the old hospital on College Hill and the other from Hillview Manor. And then we've got several investigations lined up for next year that we're really excited about. So we'll be going to those and really putting out some evidence and data from those locations.
Very packed schedule.
It is, and then plus, the historic Scott County Jail here. I'm here on a daily basis, so you can really say that the paranormal is my life.
It really is.
It is.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So, what bit of advice would you give somebody that wants to start a paranormal investigation team or wants to step in in the realm of the paranormal or supernatural?
I think the first thing that I would say would be to get a voice recorder and go to a location that is reported to be haunted, whether it's a cemetery or a house in your area or your neighborhood, and just hit record and sit and ask questions. And don't get discouraged if you don't hear anything, right? Because it's a lot like fishing. You're sitting in the dark asking questions, and it doesn't even have to be in the dark. You're sitting in a room asking questions, and you're not probably going to get anything audible. But then go back and listen, really listen to the voice recorder and see if you pick up on anything. So you really have to have patience for this. And the next thing I would say is to do it with the right intentions. And by that, for me personally, the right intentions is doing that historical research, doing that in, an investigation that's going to do justice to the spirit and the location. If you're going into this to have a jump scare on a Friday night, that to me is not the right intentions, because that's not how this works. And that's just my personal view on it. So go in with the right intentions and go in. You don't need a lot of equipment to start off with. I mean, that will come if you want to stay in this field. But just a simple voice recorder from Walmart, and just start with that, and then really kind of build your own technique and your own style.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, where can we find you at, Christy?
So our website is www.soulsistersparanormal.com. We're also very active on Facebook under Soul Sisters Paranormal, and then our YouTube channel is Soul Sisters Paranormal. If you want to learn more about the historic Scott County Jail, the website is www.historicscottcojail.com. And again, we're also very active on Facebook under Historic Scott County Jail.
That's awesome. I want to take a moment and say thank you, Kristy, for hanging out with me and sharing your experience as a paranormal investigator. I really enjoyed the conversation.
As did I. Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate it.
And everybody, thank you for hanging out with us. And I hope that you come back to the Boneyard. We're going to have a good time. Much love. Be good.